I thought I'd spend a little time defining liberalism and progressivism. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, isn't a liberal and a progressive exactly the same thing? Well, yes and no. Because if it was just yes, this would be a really short video and it wouldn't be worth talking about. However, there are a lot of historical differences and I think potential future differences. Now, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, the word meaning has drifted over time and you just have to kind of accept what's happened. Um, However, there are other words, especially political words, that are problematic because they are, in many cases, deliberately altered to basically hide other things. A perfect example being fascism versus National Socialism. Basically, we're told they're one and the same, but actually not. And it's very important why they're not because it's basically attempting to hide socialist crimes. So, first, it matters for the past because if you don't understand what liberal meant in the past, then you might misunderstand what older literature is trying to tell you, historical stuff. And also, it does have meaning in the present, even though the lines are more heavily blurred. Understanding the difference between the two philosophies is important. And I think in the future, we may see divergence between progressivism and liberalism again. I hope. So, in the big sense, what is it that we care that liberalism even existed? Well, several really critical concepts coming out of the Enlightenment and Revolutionary period come from liberalism. The idea of freedom of religion. Now, because our idea of the term liberal has been altered, if we think of it in the political context, that doesn't make sense. But if we look at the word as itself, liberal, to liberate, liberty, so freedom of religion was a liberating concept. The idea of individual property rights are liberal for the same reason. It empowers the individual. Freedom of speech is liberal. Consent of the government is liberal. Political equality is liberal. Equality before the law is liberal. Individual armed citizens as a bulwark against tyrannical governments are liberal. Free markets for individuals to make exchanges how they want is liberal. Now, a lot of modern conservatives will try to tell you that the founding fathers were conservatives. Not remotely. Uh, they were at the very least liberal. Many could be considered at least, or considered at the outset, radical, because what they were doing was quite out of the ordinary. They were changing everything, whereas conservatives are essentially attempting to stop change. If they're trying to go back, they're reactionaries. So, one of the ways we differentiate this idea of the old liberals is sometimes we call it classical liberalism, uh, or in the modern sense, libertarianism. Now, why did libertarians choose the term libertarian? Is because the term liberal had been so heavily corrupted that calling themselves classical liberals didn't have any meaning for people. So they essentially tried to work on a new word to try to give it meaning. So, what happened? What happened to this liberal experiment we were having? Well, it's called progressivism. Essentially, what we had happen was that certain groups of liberals became impatient with the speed of change. They didn't think things were going fast enough. Very specifically, the slow pace of the emancipation of black slaves in America were very vexing to them. Essentially, they gained reverence for the use of government power. And the ultimate use of government power was what happened in the Civil War. War, using government in its strongest and most brutal form to force change. This is the core idea of progressivism. This is the kernel of the beginning. This is the seed. For them, somewhere between 600,000 and 900,000 dead was a price that wasn't too high to pay because there is no price too high for progress. Progressives were the children of the abolitionists, and I mean literal. Actually, their fathers and mothers were the people who were the abolitionists. Uh, they longed for a great cause of their own, and although they grew up steeped in evangelical Christianity, pretty much they all abandoned their Christian roots. However, they decided to abandon it in favor of salvation through government. Now, progressivism's blueprint mirrors religion. For them, the cause is very holy. The adherents of the cause are good, and those who are against it are evil. People within the movement who criticize problems within the movement are treated as heretics or blasphemers. The cause itself is infallible. If failure seems to have occurred, it's only due to a lack of fervor. Whatever didn't work must be tried again harder. Progressivism was born as a religion of humans worshiping humans. It's very much a nativist religion at its core. Uh, Essentially, the early progressives were very much against the up and coming non Anglo Saxon Protestants who were rising in numbers in the country. In fact, 201, the early progressives were all what we'd call WASPs. And they very much feared what the Irish, the Catholics, and the Germans were doing to their country. And a major portion of the initial impetus of progressivism was how to figure out how to either keep these people in line or somehow convert them over to where they would be uh, useful pawns in their scheme of moving things forward. We'll talk a little bit about that nativist sentiment later because it still exists. So, give you a few differentiations so you can tell the difference between a liberal and a progressive. Liberals are free speech absolutists. All speech is necessary, even the stuff you hate. Progressives tolerate free speech as long as it furthers their cause. At any point, speech becomes cumbersome to the cause, can be restricted in any way. Uh, Liberals favor all citizens being armed to ward off tyranny. Since progressives sees their cause as infallible, there's no valid reason to rebel against a system and to bring worldly salvation. The threat of individuals having arms must be eliminated. Liberals favor property rights in the free market. Progressives only favor it as much as they are beneficial to the cause moving forward. The moment they become impediments or problems, they are willing to curtail whatever needs to be done. Finally, liberals favor peace above all, whereas progressives always consider war as an option when all else fails. So, how do we get to this state where we have this small progressive core in a nation that's probably pretty liberal in the terms of liberal as we're using it for this video. Well, essentially, the progressivist movement took over media and education. And little by little, the political class would follow. About a generation later, once the children had been raised through the system that way. Liberalism was slowly snuffed out over time by the bulk of information sources becoming progressive. Liberals were programmed to become progressives. There was a fight for the soul of the country that happened between 1890 and 1940. Essentially, the progressives were up against the classical liberals and conservatives who wanted things to stay more or less the way they were. Progressives slowly made their way forward through the establishment, eating it up piece by piece until essentially the Democratic Convention of 1936, which caused the final merging politically of liberals and progressives. Once the liberal faction was brought to heel, most people tended to look at liberals and progressives as being exactly the same thing. Now, one of the reasons why I like to differentiate still between liberals and is because, especially in the times we have now, we're starting to see certain individuals break from the progressive pack and show their liberal traits. We have Bill Maher, who is a free speech absolutist. No, he's not perfect, but that free speech aspect is very useful for him to be in a camp that we can identify with. Um, Glenn Greenwald, as a journalist, who basically is a good, solid classical liberal, is a great person to have out there. The man does fantastic research. He gets good guests. With the small exceptions, his reporting is at least something to make you think about what's going on because it's a contrary view that's hard to shake off. There's people like Jimmy Dore, who's also a good solid liberal, comedian, a funny guy, but also excellent talk show snippets he does out there. These are people I don't want in the progressive camp. So I need to call them something because they're not conservatives. They definitely are liberals. And they're the kind of people I want to have engaged in conversation, the kind of people who can probably change the minds of other liberals and break them free of the progressive collective. Now, since 1940, the US establishment has been and still is progressive in nature. The overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party is progressive. Now, they do have other wings in there. They do have a small liberal contingent. They have socialist contingent, and they have what I call the regressive contingent, what most people call woke. Over in the Republican Party, a working majority of the Republican Party is also progressive. This is hard for people to get their minds wrapped around, but if you think about the whole issue with rhinos, Republican in name only, these are the people who are in fact the Republican progressives. Somebody like Mitt Romney. Um, a truly abysmal, disgusting human being who has far, far more in common with the Democratic Party than he does with the rest of his Republican Party. He's okay with most of what's going on because he agrees with it. The only disagreements he has is how fast should it go? He believes it should be slowed down, but he doesn't believe in stopping progress or reversing progress, so he is a progressive. Um, and people of his ilk can usually be picked out. They're the ones who are always, when everyone goes, oh, right, this is the most obvious, intelligent thing for conservatives to be doing, and you'll see this one little group break away. Kind of reminds me of the nobles in the movie Braveheart waving at the foot soldiers as they're basically turning tail and letting them get cut loose by the British on the other side. because these guys don't agree with the rest of their party. But they consider that tiny difference, that how fast do we do this difference, enough that they feel they should be not exactly with the rest of the Democrats. Now, following World War II, essentially the United States was put into a unique position to where it was the superpower of the world, the only country that wasn't wrecked by the war. Uh, in this environment, progressives of America forged what is called the neoliberal order. The countries of the world essentially traded their freedom to make choices about diplomacy and security in favor of the neoliberal order providing security and keeping the sea lanes open. The neoliberal order is America centric. Now, this is a remnant of the nativism I was telling you about in the foundation of the progressive movement. This is one of the areas where progressives and socialists are both globalists. However, the progressives see America in the driver's seat of the world order, and socialists see the ideological brotherhood of socialism as the bond for nations to work together in the global order. Okay, so the reason we talked about progressivism and liberalism because it will factor into some videos coming up. I know I've talked about this scattered around in other videos in the past, but I wanted to dedicate a specific video to this. So a couple questions for the comment section below. One, do you see the potential with people like Bill Maher, Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, and others breaking free from the progressive pack? Do you see a future for liberalism in this country? And then the second question, kind of out of line with the video, the hot topic seems to be right now the uh, the grand plan for 2025 that everyone's freaking out on online. I've actually delved into it a bit, and I was curious if anyone's interested in hearing a little bit about that. It's probably not as exciting as we'd like, but if it's something you're wondering about, I can at least give you a little insight on it. So, yep, in the comments below, does liberalism have a future? And what do you think about Heritage Foundation's blueprint for 2025? Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm has brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, please check out my other titles, consider subscribing. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.